Hi, my name is Eric. I attend Brigham Young University and I'm studying accounting, and I'll be talking a little bit about Kant today. Awakened from his dogmatic slumber by Hume's skepticism about the concept of causation, Immanuel Kant proposed a new way of thinking about our interaction with the world, sometimes called a Copernican revolution in philosophy, and used it in response to Hume to show how mathematics, natural sciences, metaphysics, and morality are all possible. David Hume was an empiricist, meaning that he believed that the only things we can know for certain are things that are learned from experience. As such, Hume was skeptical about causation, holding that we impose ideas upon things out of habit or repeated experience with them. Although Kant also believed that there is reason to believe in our experiences, he took a more rationalistic approach than Hume, suggesting that the concepts applicable to mathematics, natural science, metaphysics, and morality need not emerge from experience but can be true because they are products and constructions of the rational mind. These concepts, he argued, are eventually validated by their application to experience and objects. Kant's Copernican revolution in philosophy effectively brought empiricism and rationalism together, and thus initiated a reversal of thought for many. Previously, the natural assumption that most made was that we acquire knowledge and truth when our thoughts conform to objects. In other words, objects naturally exist independent of our interaction with them, but to know those things, our beliefs must correspond to them. In contrast, Kant suggested that perhaps the objects of experience are at least partially the construction of the rational mind. In addition, he argued that the objects of experience don't actually exist independent of our rational construction. For additional information on Kant's Copernican revolution in philosophy, see the footnotes below. Kant addressed Hume's skepticism about causation through his theories of judgments and their applications to mathematics, natural science, metaphysics, and morality. He suggested that there are four groups of judgments: a priori, a posteriori, analytic, and synthetic. An a priori judgment is one that can be true without any reference to experience. For example, 2 + 2 = 4. A posteriori judgments, on the other hand, require our appeal to an experience to determine whether they are true. For example, the statement, "It is snowing outside," must be proved by an experience. In analytic judgments, the predicate is implicit in the subject. For instance, "All circles are round." The opposite of an analytic judgment is never possible. If a shape is not round, we certainly would not call it a circle. Synthetic judgments are just the reverse of analytic judgments. The predicate concept is not contained in the subject concept. Kant's own example of a synthetic judgment is that all bodies are heavy. The opposite of a synthetic judgment is always possible. Thus, we can easily imagine a body that is not heavy. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy provides additional details of how Kant answered Hume's skepticism on this subject. See the links below. Kant proposed that there are two tests we can use to distinguish a priori knowledge from a posteriori knowledge. These two tests are necessity and universality. Mathematical truths are both necessary and universal, and are therefore categorized as a priori judgments. Hume argued that mathematics are analytic, stating that they could be known through contradiction. Kant refuted this theory by saying we can understand mathematics through intuition. The structure of our minds, he suggested, is what gives us uniform experiences that we can rely on. Thus, mathematics is about more than just the objects of experience. It exists independently of our interaction with it. Kant believed that natural science is possible because nature itself is partially constituted by the concepts and principles that a rational mind must use in understanding it. He identified two aspects of powers of the mind, which he called sensibility and understanding. Sensibility is the ability to receive impressions, while understanding is a power to actively construct a representation of objects using concepts. Concepts, Kant tells us, are rules for operating on intuitions. Therefore, while Hume believed that all events and objects were loose and disconnected, Kant argued that nature is possible because it follows concepts. Metaphysics contrasts both common sense and science. A link to an excellent video that defines and explains metaphysics according to Kant can be found in the links below. Kant proposed that there are two ways to view metaphysics. The traditional form tries to understand how things are apart from our interaction with them. Going beyond experience in this way is referred to as transcendence. Kant believed that this form of metaphysics is impossible. He argues that concepts of God and the soul are illusory, but nonetheless useful, as they create a never-ending quest for an ideal in metaphysical knowledge. The other form of viewing metaphysics is to observe how we influence objects. Kant calls this form of metaphysics transcendental. Transcendental metaphysics simply tries to understand the a priori conditions of experience. Kant believed that moral principles cannot be derived from examples. We must have an ideal to compare our examples to. He suggested that if there were to be a moral law, it must exist independent of our experience, and it must be a priori. Kant proposed two kinds of imperatives to address moral law: hypothetical and categorical. A hypothetical imperative, he said, is conditional. For example, if you want X done, you must do Y. In contrast, a categorical imperative is simply a command. For example, do X. It has no reference to your goals or desires. An informative explanation of how morality presents itself to humans as a categorical imperative is provided in the description below. These forms of imperative relate to moral law, in that hypothetical imperatives are neither necessary nor universal. They only apply if you want your particular desire fulfilled. On the other hand, there is only one kind of categorical imperative: duty. Duty implies that something is requisite. Immanuel Kant successfully bridged the gap between the empiricists and the rationalists. He did so by suggesting that objects of experience are, at least in part, constructions of the rational mind, and that these objects don't exist outside of those constructions. Kant's Copernican revolution in philosophy challenged Hume's skepticism about causation and revolutionized how we view and interact with the world. He successfully explained how mathematics, natural science, metaphysics, and morality are all possible, independent of our interactions with them.